given your understanding of Old Testament Hebrew, I'd love to hear your perspective on how the land connects to your eschatology. Great question, and one that we eventually will get to as we move throughout this text. We just, having just read Genesis 1, we really haven't had enough information to really show, if you will, or present our view of eschatology. However, we could also say that since we've done a panoramic of the Pentateuch, we know that the author is very interested in the eschaton, right? The word the last days that we demonstrated and talked about throughout the Lion King series, those 4 episodes, that translates into eschatus hemerus, the last days, which is where our word eschatology comes from. Now, in general, when you talk about eschatology in systematic theology, they're talking about Christ's second coming. And the Pentateuch doesn't separate Christ's first coming from his second coming. But we know that the Pentateuch is very interested in the king's first coming, which we would, of course, say Jesus is the king, and he arrived on the scene, of course, and he showed himself as king when he defeated death. So we would very much say that, yes, the king has come, the last days have begun, and we would even say that there is a connection to the land here. And again, because the author is standing at the end of the book, the author is obviously interested in Israel. He's obviously interested in a land promise. Now, we have to ask, what is that land? And we will talk about that when we come to Genesis 2, when we come to Genesis 3, and again, when we get into the Abrahamic narratives later on. It's going to be a very often addressed question. But we would just simply say, notice here that even though the author is primarily has in view Israel because of where he's standing, that is the author at the end of this book, we could say, again, if it's Moses, they're just getting ready to enter the land, right? But notice he already knows that the land, that is the literal dirt, we could say, of Israel. We could say the dirt or the piece of land that's represented by the modern nation-state Israel. That land is not going to be enough to create the sort of utopian or create the place where God's people will dwell. And it is interesting here that in Genesis 1 through 11, the author shows his interest in a much greater land than that piece of dirt that Israel occupies. No, he's interested in the heavens and the earth. And isn't it interesting that Isaiah, we could go to many authors, and we will given time, but Isaiah, of course, when he talks about God's return and his rule, he talks about his rule over the new heavens and the new earth. We could also simply say, just to bring in a little bit of a New Testament perspective here, that when Jesus is talking with the woman at the well, and she, of course, comes back and says, hey, my fathers worship God here, your fathers worship God there. Jesus says, no, there is a time coming when true worshipers will worship God in spirit and in truth. So again, just to lay the cards on the table, I don't think the point of these texts in the Old Testament are really talking about the dirt that we would say, the physical place of Israel. It's a much larger place than that. It is the heavens and the earth.